objectives and further realizes the delivery of public services to the people of the Republic. With the commencement of the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, Bella Act as we know it, which the President assented and signed on the 13th of September 2024, and the resumption of the 2025 academic year on the 15th of January 2025, we are reminded of Section 29(1) of the Constitution that states that everyone has the right to a basic education. Now, the committee that bears the responsibility of exercising oversight and holding the Department of Basic Education to account is the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, and the chairperson thereof is Ms. Joy Maimela. Let's get to know her just a little bit better. Stay tuned.
My name is Joy Maimela. I chair the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education. I'm a member of Parliament, the National Assembly, representing the African National Congress.
And what is the primary mandate of the committee that you chair?
The committee that I chair plays oversight on basic education. Basically, there's about basic education as a department and two entities, which is SACE, which is an institution responsible for teachers, and then Umalusi as well. So we play oversight over these three institutions. You'd remember that basic education is a concurrent function. So we also do, our oversight extends to provincial departments, although of course at the provincial level there's provincial legislatures, but we essentially also do play oversight, some level of oversight over provincial departments. One of the things that I'm excited about is ensuring that as a chair of a portfolio committee, the members of those portfolio committees are empowered. So we can only play effective oversight if we're empowered, but also we ought to utilize the current digital space to actually stretch ourselves. For example, we can engage with various stakeholders, SGB bodies, through virtual meetings, as opposed to us having to stretch ourselves to go to various areas to meet them. So we can utilize that space to actually expand our reach in terms of the various stakeholders that actually are part and parcel of this basic education sector. One of the things that we've been discussing at Parliament lately is the communications, that we've not been communicating as effectively as we should as Parliament. And so our people are actually they've lost trust in Parliament because we don't give feedback. So even when you go to engage with stakeholders, you don't come back to give feedback. So one of the strategies that I'm looking at is how do we create a system of feedback, of being responsive. So if a member of any stakeholder engages the Portfolio Committee of Parliament on any other matter, how do we swiftly engage on that matter and give feedback and respond and engage other parties who are affected by whatever matter, so that members of the public can see that actually this is their parliament. We account to them, we are there representing them. But of course, as I have said, the other means is, of course, social media spaces. The digital space. There's many platforms, there's podcasts. So we are aiming to go and communicate, speak about the work that we do, enhance the platforms that we can utilize to engage with stakeholders and feedback.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're still tuned into Parliament TV, and that was Ms. Joy Maimela, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education. She joins us in studio to unpack the work of the committee, the state of readiness for the 2025 academic year, the Bella Act, and the long-standing issue of teenage pregnancy. Chair, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. We are really excited to be here.
Now, Chair, arguably, education is one of the top 5 portfolios within the country. Could you briefly just explain the role of the committee and what it entails?
Well, you'd have seen the snippet. What we essentially do is to play oversight over the provision of basic education in the country. as you would have correctly asserted when you started in quoting Section 29 of the Constitution that speaks about the right of all individuals to receive a basic education. So we play oversight over the provision of that basic education by the executive. So we check if they are adhering to the norms and the standards that they've set out. We check if this provision is equitable, if the provision of this education itself is of quality. We check the environment of the schools. We check the status of the infrastructure. And we check, of course, the other social welfare interventions that government has put in place to ensure that there is no learner that is unable to go to school because of any other reason. So we also monitor the provision of that. That is our role. We monitor, of course, the performance of the department, the DBE. We monitor if they are performing on the key areas that they've committed on. We also, of course, monitor Umalusi. We play oversight over Umalusi and over SACE as well.
Yes.
So the entire sector includes your PEDs, which are provincial education departments. So, of course, our work extends to that because schools are essentially in provinces. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
And of course, Chair, with that, then we'll focus on the establishment of the committee, which happened just right after the opening of Parliament, which was last year in July. What are then some of the key priorities for the Committee on Basic Education for the 7th administration?
Look, we've started on reflecting on what you call a legacy report. And this is a report that would give you an overview of what the previous portfolio committee was doing. So we then identified issues that are still relevant to the current portfolio committee. For example, issues like eradication of pediatric intolerance, that the department had at a time made a commitment that they would eradicate all the pediatric intolerance in the country by a certain time. So we took that through during the past year, and it is still one of the key issues that we're focused on. We engage with the department to give us regular reports on progress. Of course, the progress is promising, but we are monitoring it because there is a timeline. So part of the other areas is on strengthening the curriculum. So there has been reports about your grade 4 learners who are not reading with comprehension. It has been identified as one of the key challenges in the sector. As a result, as a committee, we focus on the interventions that the department, including all other stakeholders, are putting in place to ensure that we address that. And of course, that requires, of course, as we said, the curriculum enhancement and also teacher development.
Yes.
So we need to interrogate if our teachers are adequately trained. Do they adequately receive support to ensure that they give us the results that we desire? So we're looking at that. We're also looking at the 3-stream model. The department spoke about an introduction of the 3-stream model, meaning that grade 12 is not only going to be an exit path for learners. We're looking at introducing your grade 9 as an exit path for learners that want to go into more focus-orientated skills training. You're looking at learners who, for example, already we've got your TVET sector, where you don't necessarily need to have a grade 12 a matric certificate to actually access TVET sector courses. So we're looking at the implementation of the 3-stream model. We believe that it's going to really assist because there are many learners that stay in the schooling system unnecessarily, in our view. You know, we're looking at the provision of education and not leaving anyone behind. So we're looking at special schools, special needs schools. It's a key issue that we're looking at. If we've got adequate schooling infrastructure for our learners with special needs. We are looking at the current, it's also one of the issues that I think are going to pop out, the STEM subjects, the performance of our learners in the STEM subjects, which are very crucial for us to stimulate the economy. The skills that are needed by the economy are actually skills that are linked to the STEM subjects, and our performance has not really been that desirable. We've not had an uptake, and we've not had a performance that we can say it's something that we're proud of. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. Of course, your everyday issues are issues of scholar transport, are issues of the school nutrition program, are issues of the learner-teacher ratio, the school infrastructure. The schooling infrastructure is still a serious concern for us as a committee. As a result, those will be part of, it will be part of our focus areas for this financial year.
Now, Chair, having highlighted all those focus areas that the committee intends to focus on the 7th administration, what are some of the key highlights or achievements that the committee has fulfilled since the beginning of the establishment of the committee last year?
Well, although it would be very wrong of us to take the glory over the signing and the assenting of the Bella Act, however, it is one of the significant strides in our view. Of course, the metric outcomes. We believe that throughout, when we were engaging with the department and playing our oversight, we were really stressing. You would have seen in part of our reports, we actually encouraged and motivated the department to actually enhance their extra lessons program. So that they can give additional support to the matriculants. And we believe that has bore fruits. I mean, the results are the highest ever since the dawn of democracy. The increase in the number of bachelor passes. And of course, if you look at the performance of your quintile 1 schools to your quintile 3 schools, that is one of the, for us, it is really, it is showing that there is progress in the schooling system, that there is something we're doing right in the schooling system. Also, you look at the number of learners that are retained in the schooling system. Of course, we still have a challenge of dropout rate. We still have a challenge of not being able to ascertain where the other learners are, the learners that started with this class in grade 1. But the numbers are improving in terms of the retention of learners, especially the girl learner in the schooling system. So those are part of, we've also dealt with one of, I think for me it was a very crucial petition on access to sanitary towels. And it was actually given to us by the Office of the Speaker. We've dealt with that. We've closed that. We've actually written a report to say we need to enhance the provision of sanitary towels in our schools. We've done oversight in 2 provinces, that is the Northern Cape and the Western Cape, where we really observed certain issues that we were not necessarily happy about, and we were able to have engagements with those provinces, and some of those issues were addressed. So those are key highlights of the work we've done starting from August last year.
Now, of course, the weekly committee cluster media briefing was held on Thursday, the 16th of January 2025, where the chairpersons of the portfolio committees in the social services cluster, which includes the portfolio committee on basic education, provided insight on the work of the committees under the theme ensuring open access and provision of quality social services to the people. Let's take a look at what the chairperson had to say about the impact of budget cuts within the department. Stay tuned.
In terms of the teacher posts and budget cuts, the committee is extremely concerned about the budget cuts and their impact on what happens in the classroom. Several provincial education departments have indicated that the cuts will affect them. The Western Cape Education Department has, for example, announced a reduction of 2,400 teaching posts for 2025. Other provinces are grappling with similar substantial budget deficits. We are grateful to those provinces who indicated that they will rather cut other costs and not the number of educators in the system. The impending budget cuts pose a significant threat to the sustainability of teaching posts and the overall quality of education. The situation necessitates urgent and coordinated efforts from both national and provincial governments to safeguard the future of the country's learners and educators. We've been engaging with provincial education departments for some time now on this matter, to encourage them to find solutions to mitigate the impact of these budget cuts on the frontline services, particularly teaching. We appeal to provinces to retain their current number of teaching posts to avoid compromising education outcomes. This is more importantly because we are going to be implementing the Bella Act. That means grade R classes are going to be compulsory, meaning you need more qualified teachers in school rather than cutting teachers. So we are going to continuously engage with provincial departments to ensure that they safeguard the teachers' jobs. In terms of the Bella Act, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act 2024 introduces significant reforms. Some key provisions include compulsory grade R, language policy reforms, and admissions policy changes. The Act grants provincial department authority over school admissions, aiming to standardize processes and eliminate discriminatory practices, thereby ensuring equitable access to education for all learners. As I'd mentioned before, that there is issues of admissions in other schools. This is more prevalent in former Model C schools, where we've seen that majority of certain members of the community surrounding those schools are unable to get access to those schools due to the language policy. And we believe that this Act is going to really intervene in that instance. While the Act introduces measures to address long-standing challenges, its successes will largely depend on effective implementation and the collaboration of all stakeholders within the education sector. The committee will monitor its implementation closely. We noted the extensive public participation process and extended opportunity for further engagements on contagious clauses. We reiterate our support for the Act and call on parties to adhere to.
And that was the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education during the weekly committee cluster briefing that was held on Thursday, the 16th of January 2025. Now, the chair was reporting on the impact of budget cuts and the ripple effect thereof. Of course, she mentioned the Bella Act now and the effects thereof, and obviously the monitoring that will go on in terms of the committee, in terms of ensuring that they hold the executive to account. Now, Chair, we've spoken about some of the achievements that the Portfolio Committee has fulfilled so far. Let's talk about the Bella Act, the state of readiness, and of course the impact of budget cuts when it comes to the education system. Schools reopened on the 15th of January, and as per usual, we saw snaking queues of parents outside district offices trying to ensure that their children were ensuring that their children had got placement within the schools of their preference, of course. What are some of the challenges that the department, the schools, and the parents have reported to the committee, especially regarding that process?
One is, okay, let's start with the learner placements. It has been a challenge over years, each and every year, especially in Gauteng and Western Cape.
Yes.
So that is where your challenge is. And this is when I think we've engaged with the department previously when we were engaging on the state of readiness for the next year. So we engaged already last year to ascertain if they've got systems in place to check that they are ready to receive learners. Now, when we engaged with them, especially in Gauteng and Western Cape, one of the key drivers of this crisis of every year is the intermigration. So parents are living in their majority rural areas. They are moving into cities for better economic opportunities, of course. And as they move, they want to move with their children, you know. So you are having much more demand in the Western Cape, especially in Cape Town, the city. You are having that more demand in Gauteng as a whole. And that is a yearly thing. So the infrastructure that is in these two provinces is unable to handle the demand that comes each and every year. Even if you plan, and this is what the two PEDs were speaking to us about, even if they plan, they always plan and they always say would have slightly this number as an increase to what we have currently. But then there's an influx in the beginning of the year or when you open the registration process. That is the first. So there is that challenge of intermigration, and we've spoken to the departments to say you need to come up with a strategy, because one of the things that we as a committee cannot accept is learners that are not in class on the first day of school. That for us is the bottom line. So the other challenge is also the system that they utilize, the central system. We should interrogate its accessibility for other parents. Is it user-friendly? Is it accessible to other parents? But the other challenge, which is concerns that we've received from parents, is what I would call inadequate placement. So you'd find that a parent says, look, I stay in this area and my child is placed in a school that is about 20 kilometers from where we stay. And there's a school here and this is where I've applied. So those are easier to deal with because the department clearly is able to say, well, yes, we think something went wrong here. But in other instances, it's really about schools of choice. So parents are given a placement to a certain school, and then they simply say, well, in that school, there is no this specific sporting code, and I want my child to do that. So there is a variety of factors that have really seen this crisis that we are looking at. But I do believe that we need to have a more rigorous engagement with the department. We need to have a plan in place to ensure that we deal with this dynamics, the population dynamics in our areas, because part of government's work is to plan, and planning means you forecast, you utilize different factors to plan. So we need to plan better so that January, even if we're dealing with issues, it should not be of this magnitude. Then we go to the issue of the budget cuts. A huge crisis. In our view, it's a huge crisis. It's a huge crisis because we are currently grappling with a South African complex of high youth unemployment or unemployment as a whole, like generally unemployment. You're battling with, and economists says to us, the need group. It's one of the most vulnerable group, and these are young people who are neither in education, training, or some form of employment. So they say that is the highest. So it means you ought to have a schooling system that produces the skills that the market, that are compatible with the market demand. But also you've got to produce a skill that enables these young people to actually produce their own jobs, to create their own jobs. So, meaning you need to invest in the curriculum, in enhancing the curriculum. And that investment requires innovation. It requires for you to integrate technology. It requires you to actually benchmark with other countries that do not have this, the same crisis we have of unemployment rate. And all that requires number of teachers, trained teachers. All that requires conducive environments. So in schools, you're going to have libraries that are functioning, that are equipped. You're going to have, you must have laboratories, you must have computer labs, you must have workshops. With the three-stream model, I mean, there are schools of specializations, which we are saying we must encourage. So you're going to have serious workshops, you're going to have equipments in those schools. So we're saying that cutting budget, disinvesting in education cannot assist you. We do not believe that is going to assist. However, of course, we are facing an economic challenge as a country. The economy is not growing as we would want it to grow. So we're saying with the Department of Basic Education and the PEDs to say, in your prioritization, so this is the little amount you have, in your prioritization, prioritize what comes first, what is more crucial, what is more important. And as a result, we said safeguard teachers' posts, because that for me, you know, a child can be in a classroom that has a board that is torn, but when there is no teacher, there is no need for that child to be in that classroom. So there must be a teacher in the classroom, because that, we believe, is a crucial, essential requirement. So we are saying in the priorities, we really need to deal with what is important. But we're also saying to the departments and the PETs, they need to utilize resources efficiently and effectively. The reports we hear about mismanagement of funds, really we can't afford that at this current moment. So we need to utilize resources efficiently. Yeah.
And then, Chair, how does the committee then employ itself to tackle the issue of that parents have in terms of placement in schools that they feel are unsafe? Or it's not necessarily a case of this isn't the sporting curriculum. It's literally just a case of it's a school within a community that I feel my child cannot go to because of safety standards. How does the committee employ itself and implore the department to ensure safety within schools?
We've had that discussion. It is one of the discussion that has been at the center of the committee, because of course any parent that takes their child to school, they want them to come back safe and sound and happy. And there are parents who are having safety concerns with certain schools that their children are placed at. And our engagements with the department, well, they've said to us there is many interventions that are in place. However, we said to ourselves, we need to look at the effectiveness of those interventions. Yes. For example, we know each and every school is allocated a police officer. It's attached to a certain police station. There is random season and searches in schools. We said to them, look, let's identify the schools where, of course, we know in these schools they are you'd say your key identified school. They are known in the community that in these schools we've got issues, you know, of violence, of ill discipline, and then design a specific intervention plan for those schools, because it's not all schools that are necessarily affected by issues of safety, but there is schools that indeed there is reports over time about the unsafe environment, about the violence in the school, about especially schools. By the way, schools are mirrors of the communities they're in. So in a community where you've got high crime rates, gangsterism, you find that goes to the school as well. So you've got the same in the school. So we said in those areas, our efforts and our interventions ought to be enhanced. It can't be an intervention like with all other schools. We have to enhance it in that area. So look, of course, we've had of course also a joint discussion with the portfolio committee on police and the department as well. And they were saying that we're stretched, but we've committed to this program where we've really assigned police officers, and of course we are engaging with their communities, your street committees, CPFs, to be part of the entire team that looks after the safety of our learners at schools.
And then with that then, Chair, focusing on the issue of infrastructure, we know that South Africa has been hit by natural disasters throughout since last year. And of course, schools have suffered with infrastructure being destroyed. How is and what is the committee's approach then to ensuring that the department fulfills its promises to ensure that there is a safe and conducive classrooms for teaching and learning to take place?
Well, we've been monitoring the response plan of the department. You'd realize, and you'd have heard that during the examinations as well in the parts of Eastern Cape, there were some disruptions due to extreme weather conditions. And in some parts of Limpopo, just as schools were reopening because of heavy rains, there were schools that were destroyed, the school roofings. We are monitoring the response plan of the department. And what we will do is to continuously monitor the response plan, because what we've said to the department is that given the climate change and that this the extreme weather conditions are becoming a prevalent thing, they need to then have a plan, a strategy on how do they respond. And what is important for us is a swift response, so that learners do not miss days of classes.
Yes.
So a swift response plan. And of course, given the budget cuts in other areas, it is not that it is not in place, but we've been monitoring, and in areas where there has been prevalences of this extreme weather conditions, there has been response, and the response has been positive.
Now, of course, on the 13th of September 2024, the President signed into law the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, and it aims to improve the quality of education and makes it more equitable. Now, Chair, you alluded to this earlier on, and you spoke about it quite extensively, especially in the media briefing, regarding the committee's commitments to ensure that everybody gets on board by implementing this act. It introduces several changes, of course, to learner admissions, to grade R, for example, making it compulsory as part of DBE. Can you elaborate on the rationale behind these changes and how the committee then aims to ensure the improvement of access and equity in education?
Okay. Thanks. I think that's a very important question. We really need to build awareness on this new piece of legislation.
Yes.
The Bella Act amends the South African Schools Act. So there are certain provisions in the South African Schools Act that are amended to enhance the Act, to ensure that we provide education and we provide it in a manner that the Constitution prescribes. So the rationale, firstly, was to look at one, and this is, I think, the most important one. The department over time was taken to court, the Department of Basic Education, over issues of access, of admission. And you would remember the court cases on the requirement of documents for learners before you admit a learner. And there were court outcomes, and those court outcomes actually said certain pieces of that act were not constitutional, and as a result, that was the first rationale to amend the sections which the Constitutional Court said were not constitutional. The second rationale was that we needed to create an environment where access to education is equitable. We noted that in certain areas, and these are public schools, we're speaking of public schools, especially your Quintile 5 schools that are located in your towns, there is still serious issues with the language policies becoming barriers to access, and their admission policies becoming barriers to access. And the landscape or the arrangement of those communities have changed over time. So over time, you've got these communities in your cities. You'd find a certain race staying there or located there. As a result, the language policy will actually reflect the community that resides in that area. But that has changed, and with the change, there is a demand for those schools to accommodate the other members of the community that are in that area at the time. And the language policies of the schools and the admission policies have been a barrier. And they've been a barrier because the SGBs had exclusive powers and authority to determine those policies. And as a result, even if you engage, the SGB just decides that in this school we're going to utilize Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. So meaning as a parent who now lives in Cape Town in this specific area, and you are of a Xhosa speaking, your child can't access that school basically because of the language barrier. And that is you denying access. And that to us was a serious crisis. And it was in a way unconstitutional because there were barriers. You were creating barriers, and there was you are creating serious barriers to access to education. So that is one of the rationale. But the other is on the what you call the compulsory schooling. So the Schools Act made schooling compulsory from grade 1 to grade 9.
Okay.
So the current act then says schooling is compulsory from grade R. So it actually increases the years of compulsory schooling. And then it actually holds parents more accountable. It says a parent is accountable to ensure that the child goes to school. And if you are found as a parent to be staying with a child at home without any sufficient reasoning, then you must be held accountable. Two, it also then speaks to compulsory schooling and the responsibilities of the school.
Yes.
Remember, the Schools Act used to prescribe that only when a child has not been in school for 10 days, that's when you start tracing the child, and that's when you start reporting. But this time around, it is actually limiting those days. It says only 3 days. In 3 days that a child has not been to school and there has not been any communication of the whereabouts of the child, the school must take actions. Because we are really saying we must make schooling compulsory.
Yes.
So it also speaks to issues of corporal punishment. It actually is extensive. Remember now, the Schools Act was limiting the acts of corporal punishment to the school premises.
Yes.
So now it actually extends to your hostels when the children are out on trips. So it is actually now more extensive and it covers ground, because there are cases where corporal punishment would have been done,
Yes.
and it was outside the school premises, but it was during a school trip, and because the law did not cover that, the perpetrators will get away with it. So it is more comprehensive on it. It also speaks to issues of, it actually clarifies issues of inclusivity and diversity.
Yes.
Issues, I'm sure we would have seen how in other schools, the issue of religion, the issue of culture, how we should as schools accept and respect
Yes.
all other children's religion and their culture. So it speaks to that, and it specifies that all children, everyone has a right to practice their religion and their culture, and they should not be forced, because in other areas, in other schools, learners will go to school. Some, it is their religious belief to keep their hair, and then the guidelines or the school's code of conduct
Yes.
will demand that they cut their hair. So the act actually speaks to a lot of things. It enhances the Schools Act so that it responds to various issues that we've identified, that we've seen, that we've observed in the schooling system.
And then with that, Chair, we know that the enactment of this law was very contentious.
Yes.
So we just want to know then, how will the committee address various concerns then from civil society movements and communities who do not entirely agree with the Bella Act?
You know, when this question is asked, we must be very specific. The civil society that we speak about, we must say that it's few groupings, and they even marched against the signing of the Bella Act.
Yes.
And in their march, you could tell that they were really snippets of, for me, racism.
Okay.
And I'm saying this because they seem to say, or they seem to have this notion that these schools that we're speaking about are their schools, leave our schools. And these are public schools. Everyone must have access to those schools. And so the concerns about, which is Section 4 and Section 5,
Yes.
where we are really saying the exclusive powers of the SGB to draft the language in that mission policy have to be really checked and scrutinized by the HOD to ensure that they withstand the constitutional prescripts. So we ought to check that your language policy does not create barrier.
Yes.
So that is the two sections that were very contagious. And the certain groupings or the organizations that really opposed those two sections, in their view, they believed that we are trying to deal away with a certain language in the schools. And that is not the truth. In fact, if there is something that as Parliament we have been trying to promote, is the utilization of mother tongue. But we are saying the utilization of mother tongue should not be a barrier for others to access a school. So I think if you're saying how we are going to engage this, we will continuously engage them. We know that the department has said that they are going to be drafting regulations on how to implement the Act. Although we believe the Act is straightforward, we as a committee, what we will be looking at is that the department does not utilize the regulations to delay the implementation of the Act. The Act is ascended. It must be implemented immediately. So we'll be monitoring its implementation. But also those who still have concerns, we are willing to listen and engage.
And of course, then on the 26th of January 2024, the Department of Basic Education reported that about 150,000 girls between the ages of 10 and 19 years had become pregnant. The Department of Health reported just under 90 teenagers gave birth in South Africa in December of 2024. This is, of course, a decrease from the 2023 when 145 teenagers gave birth. Of course, teenage pregnancy has been a long-standing issue in South Africa that has great negative consequences for the pregnant teens, families and communities. Let's take a look at what the chairperson had to say regarding the matter during the cluster media briefing. Stay tuned.
We also then are focusing on teenage pregnancies and statutory rape. Teenage pregnancy remains a significant challenge in South Africa, profoundly affecting the lives of young girls and the broader society. Poverty, limited access to education, and inadequate healthcare services contribute to high rates of teenage pregnancy. Instances of sexual violence and coercion, including cases involving older men, increase vulnerability among young girls. The committee plans to work collaboratively with other parliamentary committees to address the matter and draft concept for the portfolio committee has been established to solicit public input on the issues of teenage pregnancy and statutory rape. We're doing this jointly because, among other things, it negatively affects young girls' completion of school. Many of the affected victims become pregnant as early as 10 years old. We would have seen this in the media just recently. This indeed calls for a societal approach. Public inputs will be solicited in the identified education districts and selected schools to improve the lived realities of learners who are the primary victims of statutory rape. Addressing teenage pregnancy in South Africa requires a multifaceted approach, focusing on education, healthcare access, and community involvement to safeguard the rights and futures of our young girls. Despite the improvement in the number of girls that are passing or that are staying in the schooling system, we are extremely concerned about the rates or the rising level of teenage pregnancy, but in other instances, the reported statutory rape. And as a committee, we said we're not going to just fold our arms and watch and say this is a matter that belongs to other committee. We're also going to play a role in ensuring that we contribute to curbing this prevalent social ill that we're noticing now. We're also calling on the NGOs that used to assist in terms of education, the likes of Your Love Life, to come to the table and to work with the committee and to work with the communities to ensure that we curb the prevalences of teenage pregnancy.
You are still tuned into Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408 and of course on all social media platforms at Parliament of RSA, where you can also tell us your view and join the conversation, especially regarding the basic education system. Now that was Ms. Joy Maimela, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, during the cluster media briefing that was held on the 16th of January 2024. Now she was speaking to the issue of teenage pregnancy and statutory rape, which has been a long-standing issue that our country faces. Now, Chair, this issue stresses me out. It really does. And I just want to find out from you what your thoughts are, especially regarding the underlying issues that perpetuate the issue of pregnancy, teenage pregnancy.
As it should stress you out, it should stress all of us out as South Africans. Well, there are various underlying issues. One, I always say when I respond to this question that we ought to really distinguish between the two. So we're speaking about teenage pregnancy, and that is our young people from the ages of 16 and above. The rest and the other is statutory.
Yes.
So we've got to really get communities to understand this, and it's important. Now, there are various underlying factors. One is if you go to many of the communities where this is rife, you know, it's your poor communities. If you go then to the households where this is rife, it's mostly households that are child-headed. It's households where there is no stable family structure. It's households where the young girls are vulnerable because of the poverty status, and then they end up being so vulnerable that they go and seek means and ways, and they are lured by older men with an exchange of giving them money, providing for the family. In other areas, it's really the access to your reproductive health care products. And if there is youth, you know, when we were engaging with some young people, they were saying, well, there is extensive reproductive health care in the clinics. There is also contraceptives. There is also free provision of condoms. But they were saying, well, some of the clinics are not youth-friendly.
Okay.
So we are afraid to go and access these services. So I'm saying there is extensive response and intervention from a government side through the health department. However, because of these underlying factors, because of the power relation between this young person who's vulnerable, who really wants to have a meal, who is looking for, you know, some form of money from this older person who, in terms of the power relationship, the relations in that relationship, they have more power. So if they say, no, I don't want to use protection, and this young person is vulnerable to that. So there are those factors. But the other underlying factors and things that it's really the extent at which the interventions we've put in place, if they are really getting through. Are they getting through? Because in other areas, really, issues of substance abuse are the underlying factors where when young people have abused alcohol and the environments that they are in, they end up really engaging in reckless behaviors. So we need to really fight this from a very, with a holistic approach. Substance abuse is directly linked to some of those that reckless behavior,
of course.
And substance abuse has become one of the key problems amongst the young people. We've made alcohol to look cool.
Yes.
As a result, it is cool, you know. Peer pressure, of course, as well. Where these young teens are pressured into experimenting sexually. Is as if you have not experimented sexually, you are not cool. You know, so we need to debunk these stereotypes. We need to deal with education on how these young people can handle peer pressure, can handle and can deal with substance abuse. And that requires a lot of intervention. So I think those are some and part of the underlying factors. And if you engage on the statutory rape, you know, it is very difficult. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because in many instances, the communities and the families where this our young girls live in, some of them know. So the relationships are not happening at night. They know that there's a young girl who is as young as 11 or 12. And there is this old person that is pursuing or having a relationship with such. And communities decide to look the other way, you know. So it is a very difficult one. But others are really results of abuse, of rape, of GBV in families. In some instances, it's really family members. So as a result, it is a complex one, but it is one that we need to deal with as a matter of urgency.
And with that, Chair, what are some of the recommendations of the Portfolio Committee to the department in ensuring that we curb the issue of teenage pregnancy?
One of the recommendations is we cover sexual education comprehensively through, we know the department, part of their curriculum content through the life orientation subject is to extensively cover the issue of sexual education. And our engagements with the department has always been that we need to really refocus on the boy child.
Yes.
We're really focusing on the girl child. It's the girl child. They have a responsibility to safeguard their bodies. And we really are not spending or having that much focus on the boy child, who is also an accomplice in this entire, because girls don't get pregnant by their own, you know. So we said, let's look at the curriculum and how do we enhance it. But that curriculum content has to be reinforced by a community, the family, the parents. So we said to the department, your curriculum ought to really infuse engagements with parents on how parents can really reinforce this education at home, you know.
And then with that, Chair, of course, then this is not just an issue that the Education Department is grappling with. Of course, it faces the Health Education Department, it's with the Social Development Department as well, and even police, especially when we're talking about statutory rape. Now, is the community then collaborating with the other portfolios in ensuring that they combat the issue of teenage pregnancy and they hold the executive to account as they fulfill this mandate in ensuring that there's safety and proper systems within schools and communities to ensure that mindsets are changed and that reporting is done should there be a case of statutory rape?
As you'd have heard when we had the media briefing, that already that collaboration from committees level has started, where we are really even coming up with a concept document on where we review all the policies that we have. That intervenes or that deals with your statutory rape and that deals with teenage pregnancy. We're reviewing their effectiveness, because I'll give you an example. In other areas, the policies that we have are really now having unintended consequences on the victim. So children who, because now it's mandatory that a child who's 16 years and below, they come to school and you then get, you are notified that they are pregnant. You are mandated to report. That's how you get those statistics, because the department is mandated to report. They are mandated to report not only to the department, but also to the Department of Health, the Department of Police, where it is really a minor, a child. And as a result, when when teachers are doing that process, some of the learners really drop out of school because they don't want to go through that process. They are very scared to go through that process. And this is where now the families come to play. And so some of the policies that we've got in place have unintended consequences. Also with the Department of Health, they will tell you that when we do that process of reporting, of getting the information, the learner ends up not coming back to the clinic, and as a result they miss out on very valuable health care, especially because their pregnancy is regarded as high risk. So they miss out on that very important health care, and as a result we are reviewing all these interventions, all these policies. We are saying, where are the gaps? Who have we not brought in that we should have brought in? How do we bring the communities more closer to this problem? We are also engaging with the Department of Sports and Arts and Culture to say, what has been the role of sports and arts and culture in ensuring that we really keep our young people engaged? How do we substitute the substance abuse with activities that are productive, that are going to assist our young people? So we're bringing them also, and the portfolio has engaged with us on some of the initiatives that the department is already undertaken with the Department of Basic Education. And we're saying we need to enhance that program. We really need to enhance it as urgently as possible, so that we really substitute some of these behaviors and these patterns with something that is positive, that is going to keep our young people away from those being exposed to such. But you know, the rising numbers of teenage pregnancy also echoes along the lines of the exposure of these young people to illnesses like HIV and AIDS. You would have seen the reports that the numbers of new infections amongst young people that are between the ages of 15 are rising, are on a rise. And that for us is a great concern. So we want, as a portfolio committee and with the other portfolio committees, to really build a social compact on combating this issue of the rise of teenage pregnancy and statutory rape, where you bring all stakeholders, your previous NPOs that used to play a very crucial role with peer education, your communities, including in your communities, you've got the religious sector, who sometimes in other areas, they will really be going the other way when we are trying to go the other way. So you need to bring them to the table to have a conversation on the importance of curbing this prevalence, because it really has ripple effects on the young girls, their families. Some of them drop out and they don't go back to school.
Of course.
So then they are counted on the NEET group that is not employable. So their entire future is really, really impacted by just that moment. So it's very important for us to, as a committee, as all these committees, to really interrogate and come up with a discussion document that will involve all the stakeholders. And then from there, if we need to then enact a piece of legislation, that's what we will do.
And of course, Chair, in the media briefing, you alluded to NPOs such as Love Life. And we were off air when I was telling you that during my time while we were growing up, you had your soul cities, you had your soul buddies, intersections. And these were some of the shows on the public broadcaster where we would get this sex education and awareness as to what to look out for and what not to do. What is then the committee's commitment in ensuring wider awareness about sex education, about statutory rape, and the responsibility that lies with families, with communities, with teachers, and sort of ensuring that communities rid themselves of the mindset that it is okay for an older man to date a younger child?
Yes, and that is why we're saying it will really require collaborative work, because in areas where you just go in as a committee and you say this is our view as a committee, then you find the community goes the other direction, you find the families goes the other direction. In other families, I mean, you know, patriarchal, what you call your patriarchal practices are still very rife. So young girls are encouraged to date because they must get married, because being married is the ultimate goal. So we need to have conversations where we deal with patriarchy,
Yes.
but also we deal with some of, like you were saying, the mindset. We need to change the mindset, and you can only change it through education, educating and educating.
Yes.
So we really need those NPOs. You need those TV shows to come back, and we need to reignite through. That's why I was saying we are also engaging with the Department of Arts and Culture, because it's because of that reason to
Yes.
say your role in stimulating and funding those kind of shows that communicate positively, because you must understand the media space and the social media as well
Yes.
has a huge influence on our young ones.
That's
And the content that is there, it's not necessarily a content that you can say it's positive or it has been checked. It is just really free-flowing content, and at some aspects of it really promotes this thing of you need to have a blesser.
Yes.
You must have a blesser. You know, if you want a soft life, it's very easy. You just get a blesser, as opposed to working hard, as
Yes.
opposing to wanting a career. So we need to really start activating new influencers, new social media spaces that speak positive,
Yes.
that we re-engineer
Yes.
our own values as society, a mindset that really promotes a safe environment and safe spaces for young women, even those that might be in abusive relationships, even those that might be abused at home, to speak out. You know, so we need to do that, collaborating with these NGOs. I truly believe that as a portfolio committee, from lawmaking perspective,
Yes.
if you make this law, you just come up with another law to say, let's be stringent. Its effectiveness over
Yes.
time has not really assisted. So you really need a collaborative effort.
And of course, Chair, the 2025 academic year has begun. Any final words of encouragement to the class of 2025?
We are rooting for this class. We know that they're going to take us to 90%. This is a class that, of course, has seen so many changes in the schooling system, but for the better. We are rooting for them, and we are saying to our young people that the future is theirs. They hold the key to changing the current conditions. So we are really hoping that they take this year very seriously and they study hard.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much for having us.
And that was Ms. Joy Maimela, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, unpacking the work of the committee, the state of readiness for the academic year of 2025, the Bella Act, and the long-standing challenge and issue of teenage pregnancy. Now, of course, Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," end quote. Now, in line with the famous quote, Parliament continues to fulfill its commitments in ensuring that the executive is held to account, fulfills its primary mandate and objectives, and provides quality education as per Section 29 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Now, of course, for more information on the work of Parliament and the work of the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, visit our website at www.parliament.gov.za. To stay informed about Parliament's engagements, follow, like and subscribe on all our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA, and have your say by joining the conversation and sharing your views on issues relating to basic education. After all, it is your Parliament, your voice, your future. Thank you so much for watching Parliament TV. I am Tepo Mori. Till next time.